Some people leave behind money. Others leave behind something no amount of money could buy. A single mother drives through the Tuscan hills with her 10-year-old daughter beside her. They are looking for a tannery, a crumbling, forgotten building left to them by a grandfather the family erased. A man they called a failure, a man who died alone. She almost refused the inheritance. Her daughter begged to see it first. Now they stand inside. Dust, cobwebs, rotting leather, nothing of value. Then the girl notices something. A seam in the stone floor behind an old workbench. They pull it open. Below them sits a hidden cellar. And inside that cellar are hundreds of hand-stitched leather journals. Every single one is addressed to the mother. But beneath those journals lies something else. Something three of Italy's most powerful fashion houses have been hunting for decades. What did her grandfather hide down there? And why did he leave it all for her? If this story satisfies your curiosity, consider subscribing. Now let me take you back. Just 3 weeks before that moment in the tannery, Elena Ferretti was 37 years old. She lived in a 2-room apartment in Rome with her daughter, Mia. The apartment was on the 4th floor of a building with no elevator. The hot water worked half the time. The landlord raised the rent every 6 months and fixed nothing. Elena waitressed at a small trattoria near Trastevere. Double shifts, 6 days a week. She'd been doing it for 4 years. Before that, she worked at a hotel. Before that, a bakery. The jobs changed. The exhaustion didn't. Every morning she woke up at 5, made Mia's lunch, walked her to school, took the bus to the restaurant, served food until her feet went numb, walked home, checked homework, fell asleep in a chair. That was her life. Repeat, repeat, repeat. She wasn't bitter about it. That's the thing about Elena. She didn't feel sorry for herself. She just kept going. The way you do when someone is counting on you and quitting isn't an option. Mia was 10, quiet, bright. She did her homework every night at a corner table in the trattoria while Elena served plates and cleared glasses. The owner didn't mind. He liked Mia. Everyone liked Mia. She had a way of watching people that made them feel seen. Like she understood more than a 10-year-old should. Now here's the thing. Elena had no family. Not really. Her mother lived in Naples. They spoke maybe twice a year. Short calls. Tense. Her father left when she was small. No siblings. No cousins she kept in touch with. It was just Elena and Mia. That's it. So when the letter arrived, Elena didn't know what to make of it. It was from a lawyer in Siena. Formal language. Thick paper. It said that a man named Aurelio Ferretti had died. That he was Elena's maternal grandfather, and that he had left her his sole remaining property, a tannery in the Tuscan hills, outside a village called Monteregione. Elena read the letter twice. She had never met this man. She barely knew his name. Her mother had mentioned him only a handful of times, and never kindly. He was the man who chose leather over his wife. The man who let Elena's grandmother die while he was working. The man the family cut off and never looked back. Elena's mother called him a failure. Said the tannery was worthless. Said he was worthless. Elena put the letter on the kitchen counter. She looked at it for 3 days. Then she threw it in the trash. Mia found it. Pulled it out. Read it carefully the way she read everything. Then she looked at her mother and asked one question. What if he wasn't what they say he was? Elena didn't answer, but she didn't throw the letter away again. 2 weeks later, they were in a borrowed car, driving through hills so green they didn't look real. Mia had the window down. Elena had both hands on the wheel and a knot in her stomach. She kept thinking about turning around. Every kilometer felt like a mistake. What was she doing? Driving 3 hours to look at a dead man's building. A man she never met. A man her mother said wasn't worth remembering. But Mia was humming in the passenger seat, looking at the hills like they were the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. And Elena couldn't bring herself to take that away from her. The GPS lost signal 20 minutes before they arrived. They followed hand-painted signs on wooden posts. The road narrowed, turned to gravel, then to dirt. The tannery sat at the end of that dirt road, half swallowed by ivy. A stone building, 2 stories, with a wooden door that had swollen shut from years of rain. Elena pushed it with her shoulder. It gave way with a groan that echoed through the empty building. Inside, the air was thick and still. Old tools hung on the walls. Dried scraps of leather curled on shelves. A workbench stretched across the back wall, its surface grooved deep from decades of cutting. Everything was covered in dust. Elena looked around and saw nothing of value. Nothing worth the drive. Nothing worth the hope. She was ready to leave. But Mia wasn't. Mia was on her knees behind the workbench, running her fingers along the stone floor. "Mom, there's a line here, like a crack, but it's too straight." Elena walked over, looked down. The girl was right. A seam in the stone. Deliberate. Hidden behind the workbench where no one would look unless they were small enough and curious enough to crawl. They found a metal ring recessed into the stone. Elena pulled. The slab lifted, heavy but balanced, like someone had designed it to be opened by one person. Below was a cellar. Small, dry. A single window near the ceiling let in a bar of dusty light. Elena climbed down and stopped. Wooden shelves lined every wall, floor to ceiling, and on every shelf, stacked neatly, were leather-bound journals. Hundreds of them, each one hand-stitched, each one labeled with a date on the spine. Elena picked up the nearest one, opened it. The handwriting was small, careful, steady, and the first line read, "Today you were born. I was not allowed to hold you, but I held this pen instead." Elena sat down on the cellar floor. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. Her grandfather had written to her, every single day, from the day she was born to the day he died. 37 years of letters, addressed to a granddaughter he was forbidden to contact. She read 5 journals, then 10. Then she lost count. He described her birthdays, ones he was never invited to. He wrote about her first day of school. He knew which school. He knew her teacher's name. He described the weather in Rome on days she wouldn't remember, and he imagined what she might have been doing. He knew about Mia. His later entries mentioned her by name. He wrote about becoming a great-grandfather to a girl he would never meet. He described what he imagined she looked like. He guessed she had Elena's eyes. He was right, but he never complained. Not once. He never blamed Elena's mother. Never called anyone cruel. He simply wrote, day after day, year after year, as if the act of writing was enough, as if love didn't need to be received to be real. And here's something that hit Elena hard. In one entry from 2003, he wrote about a birthday gift he made for her. A leather wallet, hand-stitched. He described every stitch. He wrapped it, addressed it, then he put it on the shelf with the journals. He never sent it, because he knew it would be returned. Or worse, thrown away. There were dozens of gifts like that, scattered among the journals. Small leather objects he made for her over the years. A coin purse, a key holder, a bracelet, all of them perfect, all of them untouched, all of them waiting. Then Elena found the reason for the silence. Buried in a journal from 1989. Her grandmother had been sick. Cancer. Aurelio was working at the tannery when she collapsed. He was in the middle of a commission, a leather case for a client in Florence. He didn't hear the phone. The neighbor drove her grandmother to the hospital. By the time Aurelio reached the hospital, she was in surgery. She survived, but barely. The recovery took months. Elena's mother, who was 16 at the time, never forgave him. She stood in the hospital hallway and told him he was the reason her mother almost died. She told the family he chose work over his wife, that he let her almost die because leather mattered more than people. The family believed it. They didn't ask for his side. They didn't want to hear it. They cut him off, changed phone numbers, moved, left no forwarding address. He accepted it without a fight. That's the part that broke Elena's heart. He didn't argue, didn't defend himself. He just let them go. And then he sat down at his workbench and started writing. Elena sat in that cellar with her hands shaking. She called her mother. "Why didn't you tell me about him?" Her mother's voice was flat. "There was nothing to tell. He was nothing. That place is nothing. Come home, Elena. He wrote to me. Every day. For 37 years. Silence. Come home." Elena hung up. She looked at the journals. She looked at her daughter, who was sitting in the corner reading one quietly. Tears running down Mia's face. Not dramatic tears. The quiet kind. The kind that come when something true reaches you and there's nothing to say about it. "Mom," Mia whispered. "He loved us." Elena decided to stay the night. They cleaned a small area on the upper floor. Laid out blankets from the car. Mia fell asleep fast, the way children do when they feel safe in unexpected places. Elena was still reading when she heard a knock at the door. She tensed. Went downstairs. Opened it. An old man stood outside. White hair. Sun-darkened skin. He wore a work jacket and held a cap in his hands. "You're Elena," he said. Not a question. "Who are you?" "Marco. I live down the road. I knew your grandfather. I saw the lights." He didn't come inside. He stood at the threshold and spoke quietly. People came for his work. Important people. From Milan. From Florence. They offered him everything. He sent them all away. Elena asked why. Marco looked at her for a long moment. "He told me he was saving it. For someone who would understand." Then he nodded, put his cap back on, and walked into the dark. Elena went back to the cellar. She looked at the journals. She looked at the shelves. And for the first time in years, she felt something she couldn't name. Not happiness exactly. Something quieter. Something like being found. Like someone had been holding a door open for her entire life, and she finally walked through it. She picked up one of the small leather gifts from the shelf. The bracelet. She put it on. Fit perfectly. Of course it did. He knew her wrist size. He described it in a journal entry from 2011, based on a photograph he somehow obtained. She didn't want to think about how much effort that took. How much longing was behind a single measurement. She lay beside Mia and closed her eyes. The tannery was silent. The hills were still. She thought the hardest part was over. She had the journals. She had answers. She had proof that someone in her family had loved her completely, without condition, without ever asking for anything in return. She slept deeply, peacefully. She was wrong about the hardest part. The knock came at 8 the next morning. Sharp, professional, not like Marco's gentle tap. Elena opened the door. A woman stood on the step. Mid-50s. Expensive coat. Leather gloves. Hair pulled back tight. She smiled the way people smile when they want something and have already decided they'll get it. "Elena Ferretti?" "Yes. My name is Silvia Conti. I represent Casa Morlini, one of Italy's oldest fashion houses." She paused. "May I come in?" Elena let her in. She didn't know why. Maybe because the woman's voice was calm and certain, and Elena's life had been neither of those things for a very long time. Maybe because she was curious. Maybe because she was tired of being afraid of things she didn't understand. Sylvia walked through the tannery slowly. She touched the walls. She ran her fingers along the workbench the way someone touches something they've been told about but never seen. She didn't seem surprised by the dust or the decay. She seemed to be looking for something specific. And from the way her eyes moved, Elena could tell she had been here before. Or at least she had studied photographs of this place. "Your grandfather was a remarkable man," she said. "He developed techniques that no one in the industry has been able to replicate. Leather treatments that changed the texture, the durability, the feel. We've known about his work for decades. We approached him many times. He refused every offer." She turned to Elena. "We believe his designs are still here, somewhere in this building. Patterns and techniques that could change how leather goods are made across the entire industry." Elena said nothing. Sylvia reached into her coat and placed a card on the workbench. I'm authorized to offer you 200,000 euros today for the contents of this tannery. Believe me, 200,000 euros to a woman who counted coins to buy groceries. That number landed like a punch. Elena thought about the apartment with no hot water. She thought about Mia's shoes, which were a half size too small because new ones weren't in the budget. She thought about every double shift, every aching back. Every night she fell asleep in her uniform because she was too tired to change. 200,000 euros. Sylvia watched her carefully. I should tell you, others will come. Not all of them will be as polite as I am. Elena asked for time. Sylvia gave her 48 hours. Left the card. Drove away in a black car that probably cost more than Elena would earn in 5 years. Elena went back to the cellar. She read more journals. And she found something that changed how she understood everything. In entries from the late 90s and early 2000s, her grandfather described being pressured. Visits from men in suits. Phone calls at odd hours. Letters from lawyers. They wanted his techniques, his patterns, his innovations. They offered him money, then more money. Then they stopped being friendly about it. He wrote about it plainly. No drama, no self-pity. Just facts. They want the leather. They don't want what the leather means. Elena read that line 3 times. She didn't fully understand it, but she felt the weight of it. That afternoon, a second visitor arrived. A man this time, younger than Sylvia, less polished. He drove a rented car and parked it sideways across the dirt road, like he wanted to make sure Elena noticed it. He didn't introduce himself properly. He leaned against the doorframe and spoke like someone used to being listened to. I hear you've come into some interesting property. Elena didn't respond. Your grandfather made enemies by keeping those designs locked away. People invested time and resources trying to get them. Real money, real patience. You don't have to make the same mistake he made. It wasn't a threat. Not exactly. But it wasn't friendly either. His eyes moved past Elena into the tannery. Scanning. Calculating. Elena told him to leave. He did. Slowly. He stopped at his car and looked back. 48 hours isn't a lot of time. Just something to think about. He drove away. Elena locked the door. Pulled the workbench against it. Sat with Mia in the cellar and tried to breathe. Her hands were shaking. She thought about the apartment in Rome. The hot water that barely worked. The rent she could barely pay. She thought about how small and safe and predictable that life was compared to this. Compared to strangers showing up at her door with money and warnings. Mom, are we in trouble? No, baby. We're fine. She wasn't sure that was true. But she said it the way mothers say things they need their children to believe. That night, Elena found the final journal. The last one her grandfather ever wrote. The handwriting was different, shaking, uneven. He was dying when he wrote it. She could see it in the way the letters trembled. The entry was short. Elena, if you're reading this, I'm gone. The designs are yours. But read the letters first. All of them. That's the real inheritance. What you do after is your choice. But know this. I kept my best work for you. Not because you needed it. Because you're the only one who would understand why I chose love over money. Below that, in smaller handwriting, almost an afterthought, look under the workbench. I left you one more thing. Elena went upstairs, got on her hands and knees, ran her fingers along the underside of the workbench, felt nothing, checked again, pressed every seam, every joint, every edge. Nothing. She sat back on the floor, frustrated. Exhausted, the cellar full of love letters behind her, the threat of strangers ahead of her, and somewhere in this building, something her grandfather wanted her to find, something she couldn't see. She stayed on that floor for a long time. Mia found it. Of course she did. The next morning, while Elena was reading in the cellar, Mia was upstairs, doing what Mia always did. Watching, noticing, paying attention to things other people walked past. She was sitting on the floor next to the workbench, tracing the wood grain with her fingers, when she felt it. A small notch, not a crack, not wear and tear. A notch, deliberate, cut into the underside of the front panel. She pressed it. A drawer slid out, narrow, hidden in the frame of the bench itself. It moved on a track her grandfather had built by hand, smooth and silent even after years of neglect. "Mom!" Elena climbed up from the cellar, saw the drawer, knelt beside it. Inside were three things. The first was a set of leather tools. Not factory tools. Hand-forged. Custom. Each one had a wooden handle, and each handle was engraved with a single name. Elena. He made them for her. He always believed she'd come. The second was a flat piece of leather, thick and shaped like a plaque. Carved into it, in letters cut deep and stained dark, were the words, "For Elena, from a man the world forgot, who never forgot you." Elena held it against her chest and cried. Not the quiet tears Mia had shed. The other kind. The kind that come from a place so deep you forgot it was there until something reaches it. The third item was a letter. Not a journal entry. A letter. Written on separate paper, folded carefully, sealed with a leather cord. She opened it. Her grandfather's voice came through the page as clearly as if he were standing beside her. He explained everything. He was a master leather artisan. Self-taught at first, then trained by an old craftsman in Florence who saw something in him. Over decades, he developed techniques that no one else could replicate. Ways of treating, cutting, stitching, and shaping leather that turned it into something beyond material. His work was art. The fashion houses found out. They wanted his methods. They wanted to mass-produce his techniques. Turn craft into product. Art into inventory. He refused. Not because of pride. Because he believed that some things lose their meaning when they're made by machines for people who don't understand them. They offered him wealth. He said no. They offered him fame. He said no. They stopped asking and started pressuring. He still said no. And when his family cut him off, when his daughter told the world he was a failure, when he lost everyone he loved, he kept working, every day, not for money, not for recognition, for Elena. He saved his best work, his most revolutionary designs, his greatest innovations. He sealed them in a leather case and hid them in a cellar with 37 years of love letters. Because he believed that one day Elena would come, and she would understand. Elena read the letter aloud to Mia. Her voice broke 6 times. Mia sat beside her, holding her hand, and didn't say a word. Now get this. The next morning, Silvia Conti returned. Right on time. 48 hours, just as she said. She knocked on the door. Elena opened it. But she wasn't the same woman Silvia had met 2 days ago. Something had changed in her eyes. Something had settled. She stood straighter. Her voice was steady. She looked like a woman who had spent the night reading love letters from a man who chose integrity over everything, and who had decided that she was going to honor that choice. "Have you considered my offer?" Silvia asked. "I have." And Elena named a price. It was far more than 200,000 euros. Far more. The number hung in the air between them like something solid. Silvia blinked, adjusted her gloves. "That's considerable." "My grandfather waited 37 years, Elena said. "He could have sold those designs any time he wanted. He could have been rich. He could have been famous. He chose not to. He chose to wait for me. So yes, the price is considerable, because the work is worth it, and because the man who made it deserved better than what you offered." Silvia studied her face. Whatever she saw there, she recognized it. Maybe she saw Aurelio. Maybe she saw the same stubbornness that had driven her industry mad for decades. The same refusal to be pushed. The same quiet certainty. She agreed. But Elena wasn't finished. "One condition. Every piece produced from these designs carries my grandfather's name. Aurelio Ferretti. Every label. Every tag. Every piece." Silvia nodded. "That can be arranged." They shook hands. Silvia left, and the tannery was quiet again. The man who had come the day before, the one with the veiled threat, he never came back. Marco told Elena later that he was nobody, a middleman, a man who traded on intimidation and had no real power behind him. just greed wearing a suit. Elena stood in the tannery that evening. She held the tools her grandfather had made for her, felt the smooth handles, the weight of them, the care carved into every curve. She looked at Mia, who was arranging journals on the shelves, putting them back in order by date, carefully, reverently, like a librarian tending to sacred texts. Elena made a decision. She didn't announce it. She didn't need to. It was the kind of decision that doesn't need words because it's already been made somewhere deep inside, and all that's left is for the body to follow. 6 months passed. Elena and Mia lived in the tannery. They repaired the roof first, then the door, then the windows. Marco helped. He brought tools and stories and, on most evenings, a bottle of wine that he claimed was ordinary but that Elena suspected he saved for occasions. The money from the designs came through. It was more than Elena had ever imagined having. Enough to never waitress again. Enough for a proper apartment in any city in Italy. Enough for Mia to attend any school she wanted. But Elena didn't move back to Rome. She didn't buy an apartment. She kept the tannery. She read every journal. All of them. Every entry. Every word. Took her 3 months. She read them in order, starting from the day she was born and ending with the trembling final page. She read about her 5th birthday, which her grandfather described in such detail that she almost remembered it herself. She read about her first heartbreak, which he somehow knew about. She read about the day Mia was born, and his entry that day was only 1 line long. Now there are 2 of you. The world doesn't deserve either one. She learned things she never expected. He had attended her school play when she was 12. Sat in the back row. Left before anyone saw him. He had walked past the trattoria where she worked, once 3 years before he died. He saw Mia doing homework at the corner table. He wrote about it for 7 pages. He never tried to contact her. Never broke the family's rule. He accepted the punishment he didn't deserve and turned it into something else. Something permanent. Something that would outlast the silence. Elena called her mother. This conversation was different. Quiet. No accusations. No anger. Elena sat on the workbench with her feet dangling and the phone pressed to her ear, and she spoke the way you speak to someone you finally stopped fighting with. I read his journals, Mom. All of them. Silence. He never stopped loving us. Any of us. Not even you. He wrote about you too. He forgave you before you ever asked. He understood why you were angry. He just wished you'd let him explain. Her mother didn't speak for a long time. Elena could hear her breathing. Could hear the television in the background. Could hear the sound of a woman sitting alone in an apartment in Naples, holding the phone and facing something she'd spent 30 years avoiding. When she finally spoke, her voice was smaller than Elena had ever heard it. I know. 2 words. 30 years of silence. And 2 words. Elena didn't push. Didn't ask for more. Some doors opened slowly. And that was enough for now. A week later, a package arrived at the tannery. From Naples. Inside was a photograph. Elena's grandmother and grandfather, young, standing in front of the tannery. Smiling. Her mother had kept it all these years. On the back, in her mother's handwriting, I'm sorry it took me so long. Elena put the photograph on the shelf next to the first journal. Elena hung the carved leather sign above the tannery door. Mia held the ladder. Marco watched from the road, his cap in his hands. For Elena. From a man the world forgot, who never forgot you. Elena opened the tannery as a workshop. Small. Quiet. She didn't mass-produce anything. She made things by hand. 1 piece at a time. The way her grandfather did. She used his tools. She studied his techniques. And she taught Mia. Mia had his hands. Patient. Steady. She picked up the craft like she had been waiting for it her whole life. Like something in her blood recognized the leather and the tools and the quiet rhythm of the work. She would sit at the workbench for hours, cutting and stitching, and Elena would watch her and see the same concentration that her grandfather described in his own journals. The same focus. The same love for the material. Marco came by most evenings. He sat on a wooden chair outside the tannery door and told stories about Aurelio. How he woke up every morning at dawn and worked until dark. How he talked to the leather like it was alive. How he once spent 6 months on a single bag because he wasn't satisfied with the stitching. How he talked about Elena constantly, to anyone who would listen, to Marco, to the baker in the village, to the woman who sold him groceries. They all knew about Elena. They all knew she would come someday. Aurelio told them so. The fashion house released a line under Aurelio Ferretti's name. It sold out within a week. Critics called him a visionary, a lost master. Articles were written. His name appeared in magazines he would have never read. People who had dismissed him as a hermit and a fool now called him a genius. Elena noticed the irony. She didn't comment on it. Elena read the reviews and smiled. But she didn't keep them. She didn't frame them. She didn't hang them on the wall. Because the thing she valued most was not the money. Not the recognition. Not the articles or the praise or the vindication of a man who spent his life being called a failure by people who didn't understand what he was building. It was a small leather bookmark. Mia made it one evening, sitting at the workbench, using the tools her great-grandfather had carved for her grandmother's hands. She stitched it carefully, stained it dark, and she tucked it inside the first journal, the one that began with the day Elena was born. On the bookmark, in a child's careful handwriting, Mia had written 7 words. "He waited for us, Mom. And we came." Elena kept that bookmark closer than anything she owned. Closer than the money. Closer than the designs. Closer than the sign above the door. Because some people leave behind money. And some people leave behind 37 years of love, written in a cellar, for a granddaughter they were never allowed to hold. Aurelio Ferretti left behind the second kind. And Elena made sure the world knew it. Not because he asked, because he never did. And that is exactly why she did it.